So I was never quite happy with the first video that I did about the Tesla battery pack, so I figured I'd redo the video this time with better graphics and a better explanation. So here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is the size of the cells in the battery pack. Now I've done this clip here to show you on the left hand side the yellow battery represents your typical AA battery cell. It has a diameter of 14 millimeters and approximately 50 millimeters tall. It's a pretty standard size, been around for a long time. Tesla uses an 18650 battery cell format that's represented by the blue. It's 18 millimeters by 65 millimeters tall. Even though it's an 18650 battery cell format that's commonly used in cheaper laptops, and of course laptops were made several years ago, most laptops don't really use this size anymore. The internals of how the battery is constructed and the chemistry is completely different. It's really optimized for automotive usage, so it's not a laptop cell. It just happens to be the format size that they used a long time ago. Now, as it pertains to Model 3, we had predicted a long time ago that they would certainly use a bigger battery cell. We expected them to use a 2070 cell, and that's represented here in the green, and it's been confirmed. Elon did confirm it recently that the new cell format going into the Model 3 is going to be this new lithium format cell. It's approximately 10% larger in both dimensions, so that by the cubic calculation, that's about a 30% increase in volume capacity. How that will translate to energy density, we don't know, but it will certainly be higher. This is required to keep the cost of the battery pack down, as well as have more energy storage inside the battery pack, because the Model 3, of course, is a smaller car than a Model S or a Model X. So hopefully this helps a little bit. Let's talk about the battery module itself. So the basic construction of the Tesla battery pack consists of battery modules. Now each one of these modules has 444 18650 battery cells arranged vertically. Now this is an oversimplification of the drawing I've done here. It's not to scale, it's not 100% accurate, but I wanted to give you a pretty good idea of how the battery is actually constructed. So they start with these modules, and the modules have coolant lines that flow through them, represented here in the yellowish-orange color. These coolant lines are filled with a glycol coolant, and it's similar to what you would find in a car radiator. And I haven't drawn it here, but there's an inlet and an outlet on each one of them. And these ones surround the battery modules more or less like this. What's not shown here in the graphic is between the battery cells and the modules themselves, Tesla coats everything with an intumescent coating. And the intumescent coating is to prevent, it helps cool the battery cells, but it also prevents the battery cells from thermal runaway from affecting an adjacent cell. So if one of these cells decides to go crazy, the intumescent coating in there is supposed to help it from touching the other cells. And then the last layer here that I'll put on here is a top layer. Now this top layer is a very thin aluminum sheet, if you will, or metal sheet. It's actually separated into, and I didn't draw it here, but it's actually separated into several segments because the battery modules are grouped together in approximately 100 cell groups. And what I haven't shown here is that this plate is actually perforated with holes, and each one of the battery cells is connected to this plate with a very thin wire, and this thin wire acts as a fusible link. So like I said, if there's a thermal runaway in one of the cells, the fusible link is supposed to break and take the cell out of the battery module. So that's a rough approximation of how a battery module is constructed. Now the last piece of the puzzle is the battery box itself. So the battery box is a welded aluminum box. It weighs about 250 pounds. And in the battery box, each one of those modules that I described previously is inserted into the battery module, into the battery box. There are 16 battery modules in the Tesla battery pack, and they're arranged like this. Each one of these is one of those. Each one of the blue boxes here represents one of the battery cells. The two in the front are stacked one on top of another, and that's why if you look at pictures of a Model S battery pack outside of the car, there's a hump at the front. Either side of the battery pack here at the front, it contains things like the pumps and some of the circuitry. And the other thing that I didn't show here, on each one of these battery modules, that there's a small circuit board, which is the battery management system, also known as the BMS. And that communicates with the central CPU of the car, battery health and state of the charge and all this other stuff. The other thing that you can't see too well here is that the battery box itself, there's firewalls that are built between all of the different battery modules in here. And I didn't draw it either, but on the bottom of the firewalls for each one of these cells, there are little vents on the bottom. So if one of the battery cells gets a thermal runaway, the gases are expelled at the bottom of the battery pack and away from the passenger compartment. So the passenger compartment would lie on top of this. There's a plate here, and the bottom of the battery pack also has a large 1/4-inch aluminum armor plate on the bottom, and that helps protect the battery pack against perforations and intrusions. Now, the Tesla battery pack is sealed against water and moisture intrusion through a very thick goo that's inserted between the cover and the frame. It's very similar to something called Pro Seal that we used to use in the aviation industry. We used to call it the Black Death on account of the stickiness of the nature and its vile smell of sulfur. So that's a rough idea of how the battery pack actually operates inside the vehicle. Now, as far as cells are concerned, the Tesla battery pack, let's say an 85 or a 95 kilowatt hour battery pack, has 7,104 18650 battery cells. Some of you may be asking, well, why does a 60 kilowatt hour battery pack on the previous vehicles, is there cell differences or is there chemistry changes? Yes, there's a little bit of chemistry, but in some cases, and I might have a picture to show you here, that some of the battery cells, the modules themselves, have blanks inserted in them. So with the blanks means that there's no energy there, so that's how they can get a lower kilowatt hour count on the battery pack. Now, if you compare the battery cells to, say, a Model S or a Model X compared to some other electric vehicles on the market, some of you might be wondering, well, why did Tesla choose a cylindrical cell compared to what other manufacturers are using, which are rectangular cells, also known as prismatic cells, sometimes also called pouch cells. You'll find these in the Nissan Leaf or the Chevy Volt, and the upcoming Bolt from Chevy as well uses this type of cell format. And it has to do with history. When Tesla first started in 2003, the cylindrical cell format, which was used in laptops at the time, was the popular cell. And because it was the only thing that was really commercially available in large quantities, that's what they settled upon. And they've since built their thermal management system, the heating/cooling system for the battery cells, around this the cylindrical format. So it's worked very well for them, and they're going to continue using this cell format for the foreseeable future because they have a large invested amount in this, and it works for them. So that's really the reason why. It's not like one cell format's better than another, or one's cheaper, or more expensive, or whatever the case may be. It's just part of it has to do with history. This is what they started with, but their manufacturing capabilities now with the Gigafactory really will bring the cost of these cells down. Now, a thermal management system is very important in an electric vehicle because you must maintain the temperature of the battery cells to a consistent temperature, because otherwise the range of the vehicle will suffer. If the battery gets too hot, Nissan Leaf owners in places like Arizona and hot climates suffer quite a bit of battery range loss because the temperatures get too high. And of course, you want to protect the batteries from getting too cold because you'll suffer in the winter from range. So it's very important to have temperature managed inside these batteries, and that's why they've built this very sophisticated liquid cooling system in their cars. So I hope the video goes a long ways to explaining the internals of the battery pack and hopefully explain how things work a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe to our Twitter feed at Model 3 Owners and join our forum at Model 3 Owners Club, and don't forget to subscribe to YouTube channel. Thanks. And we have some very interesting things happening this week with some other videos coming up, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.